Yeah, welcome to another live art demo. We are centered on our figure here for reference. I want to start by talking about references a little bit because we had some questions about it last time. The way I like to use references is sort of minimal these days compared to how some people might approach using references. I don't go back and forth a lot. I try to kind of stay in a flow state as much as possible. So if I'm jumping back and forth between windows, that can kind of disrupt things, or there's a greater chance for it. So what I like to do is sort of stock up on like visuals in my head ahead of time, if that makes sense, or just sort of like a refresher. So here's an artist I've been looking at. Shout out to Ente Ryu. This is from their art station. I just grabbed, a collage of their examples here. They do a lot in 3D and then paint over it, from what I can tell. But their sculptures are really cool. But I love the way that there's so much energy in the hair and the flow. But look at like this is gonna get pixely as we look in, but you can see like this nice range of contrasts. That's sort of what I'm shooting for. We're not always gonna hit it, but this gives me like a clearer idea of like how I kind of would like to approach form and color and shadow, and just getting like a nice clean but still like excuse me, energetic look. It's an artist they're an artist that I've been paying attention to for a long time now, sometimes without realizing it. That I've been looking at them for a while, just in different places, and realizing that they're all from the same artist. But I really like their style, and it's something that kind of gives me inspo on like kind of what to shoot for. So that's kind of how I like to use references. Otherwise, if I feel like a costume or something is lacking, I suppose I have this on backup too, which is just from like a Pinterest board I've made. It's just got some ideas that I can kind of pull from. But yeah, otherwise, like you kind of want to just, or at least the way I do it is it's more about just like finding that flow of expression and making the artistic statement as true to what you would do, right? Like that's the thing too, like if I'm going off of references, I find that sometimes I get like a little closer than I might mean to. And so, I don't know, I want to make sure that it's definitely me here. So we're going to go back to grayscale for a sec. We started laying in color just to kind of show it a little bit at the last time. But we want to push things a little bit more here. In fact, we may reference our Ryu board a little bit more just to make sure we're pushing things as much as possible. So first thing is, the last thing from last time, is that I really want to adjust the posing here. And this is actually a good chance to talk about posing, which was one of the YouTube comments we got last time asking for help with that. And like I think we've got like a nice dramatic like start here, but there's more that can be accomplished, specifically in just like more like foundational things. So what I'm doing is kind of fixing this edge here, because I think the pose that we got was a little bit stiff. Like our arm is kind of just shooting down and then out, right? I want to add just like a little bit more motion to that if we can, and it might take us a little bit of time to feel it out, because normally you would want to kind of nail this early on so that you're not backtracking so much or like having to kind of fix this stuff. It's just the benefit of like getting it right on the first pass. You don't always do it, so, and like it would be weird to expect to, so we want to know how to fix things. But one thing that is working, but we may want to add to it, is that this hand is sort of hidden. It might be nice to do something with it. I just hadn't decided on what. But what we do have is sort of a range of values here. Oops. So like coming from, let me do some new layer because I want to leave it here. Coming from the back, like further in space, coming out here, we have a lighter value, and then over here we've got, that's pretty much the same, but that's like our light values here, but we do have a lot darker values in the foreground. So even in like one, what would you call it, like field, this is our foreground, right? Our foreground figure, we do have a range of values to kind of push certain elements back further into space. Like this is our shadow here versus our shadow here. You can see just looking at it that it's darker on the foreground elements. That's one way to kind of push things back in space. Like, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is that you're gonna have to make use of foundational skills of like perspective, and atmospheric perspective can help a little bit if you want to exaggerate things like I do. But also you can make use of things like level of detail, right? Like things in the background and things in shadow are going to be what I like to do, and what I've seen done that I've sort of adopted, is having maybe less detail visible in areas that are further away or in shadow because there's less light to see them. But yeah, you can make use of all your little tricks, all your little tricks and stuff to kind of help like add depth, I guess is what I'm getting at, for your poses, and that's a big part of selling it, right? But if your question is going to be more on like initial posing, then really I guess what I would say is that you want something dramatic. So like you can do like stick figure type stuff, you know, you can have like hips, shoulders, knees and toes, no, and stuff, I guess, but that's not really how I approach it. I would say for this style I would avoid that. Instead, I guess how I would explain it is that you want to sort of like abstract these things, these concepts. Like, I'm worried that people might be getting hung up on the idea of selling the pose of a person, and that's more important than other things and should be considered differently. I would say to rule out that thinking and consider everything the same way. Break it down into forms and flows. So like what we were going over last time a little bit is that like with the texture of our brushes here, we can kind of just start making marks. And we know there's going to be a head up here, but like, see, we did some like swoopies or whatever. I'm already just kind of thinking like this would be kind of like an upper body, and we have a lighter tone here and a darker tone here. So this can be like a shoulder or whatever. And then we've got like some hips and stuff. And some of this is coming from a background in, you know, like we had to do, if you didn't have like formal teachings or whatever, like in school, then some of this will be coming, it's important to note, will be coming from like anatomical studies done in foundational classes. So like I roughly know the measurements and stuff, but you can you know, futz it a little bit. In fact, some dramatic poses might benefit from exaggerated proportions, right? If you're going to sell like an action or something, that could definitely be a tool in your belt. But see that there's a lot of motion here, and I've already mentioned that I like diagonals, so there should be no surprise here. But still, the neck is sort of straight, but like, you know, if you wanted to, you could like bend the head over this way, and now I've got a nice little pose there. So like, see, I'm not even like really like planning this out that much. It's just sort of reading your own mess, I guess. But having like strong shapes is something to shoot for. We've got a nice range of, like, if we compare it to, you know, like a straight line here, we're going off the beaten path quite a bit. And I guess what I would associate with a lot of people's probably like pitfalls early on with like posing is like having things be too stiff or maybe too straight. You can make use of that too. Like, that's not necessarily something to shy away from, but I feel like, yeah, like that comes with an effect, right? Like if you want somebody to look stiff or whatever, you would have that probably best used in contrast to characters that are moving, to show maybe like an ominous figure, something imposing or alien. But basically, you're looking for fluid motions and all that. So yeah, I can't spend too long on it, but I hope that's helpful. I hope that sort of answers. Maybe I'll leave that there, just in case we want to reference it later. But yeah, so for posing, it's less about, in my approach, it's less about like taking a figurative like little like marionette and sort of moving the arms and feet around, and it's more about placing a person inside of dramatic forms and motions. You create the dramatic forms and motions, and you can put somebody in there, if that makes sense. So one thing I might do here, okay, good. I want to shift this up just a little bit, because I think our character we want them to take up a little bit more space. We'll see if our color laying in once if we would want to move that up a little bit too. The nice thing about having snap on is that it will snap back to where it thinks everything should go, and it seems like it did a good job there. So that's good. That was just with the move tool. But yeah, we'll take our color away again. But now we have this space down here. We want to fill it in. So we'll just kind of do that manually. And it's one danger is that, we have a line here. We want to make sure like that doesn't really survive so much. We want to try and eliminate that. So I'm going to a more solid brush to make sure that it is absolutely getting covered. But I also, I don't know, as far as like for personal works go, I wouldn't necessarily, I don't want people to be too scared of like leaving artifacts in, depending on your tastes, because I don't know, this is sort of like, this is subjective, but a lot of art is subjective, so we'll roll with this. But something that's been on my mind lately with the advent and popularity of like AI art and stuff is sort of leaving in mistakes here and there. That's something I personally choose. But I think there's value in that just because it is something that we get to decide, right? It's not about perfecting something, unless it is, because there are some fields where you like, if you're going to be a medical illustrator, you're going to want to get things right. But if it's for your own tastes and stuff, like, you get to decide whether things stay or go. And as long as you know how to remove them, I think that's the important thing. But deciding whether they do or not gives you more agency as an artist. But also I think in this context, it sort of adds some flavor to the medium, right? Like, I think a lot of people enjoy digital art because it lets you achieve like a cleanliness or like a sharpness that would be harder to achieve traditionally. And that's true, and I think that's fine. It definitely helps me in some areas, but I try not to make sure that's like the focus for my art personally. I like a level of looseness and stuff, and if you can trace the steps on like how I did certain things or where I kind of took some bold moves, I don't hate the idea of that, I think it's something that comes with the medium, and I'm not really shying away from that. So I don't know, it's up to your discretion on whether that's something you would consider to be important in your art, but it is worth considering, I think. So I just want to look again at, I think right now what I'm seeing is that we have a lot of midtones in our front here, right? Yeah, our brightest is not very high at all. So one thing we could do is really push the lights more. I think that would be effective. So we'll work on that, but there's still a couple things I want to address here. Oh, what layer am I on? Okay, good. Still a couple things I want to fix up before we get to that. The hair has been bothering me on this guy. I want to sort of soften the edges a little bit because it still is coming across like a helmet a little bit. So we want to loosen that. It's another thing I've sort of picked up from looking at like painting styles is edge deletion or destruction. It's a nice way to sort of, like I mentioned earlier about like taking away detail. You can pick and choose here, but this is one of the reasons why I picked this skew from all of our rough drafts, is that there were already some opportunities for broken edges that help like the viewer's eyes sort of flow better. I think so. Like you can have like rigid lines and stuff. Like if I wanted to like make this cape like a really hard edge, or something, that could be helpful. But it's going to point the eyes kind of down towards this area. And I think it's a lot more interesting if there's softness and stuff. Am I allowed to recreate this piece? I low-key think it could be really fun, but if not, that's okay too. Yeah, no, that's by all means. This is for demo purposes. If you can, if you think that would be helpful for you, I have no issue with it. This is sort of this is an exploration of things. This isn't necessarily a piece that I have like plans for in the future. Though I still technically have copyright. Ha ha ha. Just a little tip for you entrepreneurial types. I have default copyright of things I made. No, but go for it. I I think that that could potentially be a beneficial way to learn. I mean, it's like doing a study. I mean, it is a study, but I don't know. I wouldn't call it a master study, right? I definitely would not. But yeah, no, we can go brighter here. I do also want to like readdress the hand. May even completely restart it on a new layer here. I think we can do better. The size of it's not bad, but I'm gonna go on a new layer here and lay in a mid-tone, I think. Let's take a look at our board here and see if there were any hand examples we can kind of glance at. Not a ton, they're kind of all cut off here, but got one here, hands. This one was probably the first piece that I looked at from this artist, Ente Ryu, that I really, really enjoyed. I was like, when I first saw this years ago, I was like, how? How did you achieve this? This is insane. And the hands in that piece look a little big even, but anywho, neither here nor there. All right, so let's see here. We have some foreshortening. I'm gonna actually use some like sharper lines for our kind of sketch here. It's like it might be ending up a little small. I'm just sort of like marking where I think the knuckles should be. I think I have a slight glare from the window behind me. I should have shut the curtains. But we'll make do. It's midday over here for me. Hopefully it's not too early or too late where people are at right now. Finger's a little long here, but in my head I sort of have the knuckle here, and then down here. 8 p.m. for you? It seems reasonable. Or like not too late. Okay, where's my eraser? Eraser's very big. Actually, we don't want to use the eraser because we're on the same layer as our mid-tone wash. Alright, I'm actually not digging the fact that we can see the fingertip there. Let's zoom out a little bit. Hand's looking a little small here, so I'm actually going to size it up a little bit. Maybe erase a little. Glare is really starting to bother me now that I've become aware of it. So the palm is, I think, where we're going to have a lot of light here. And I'm actually even going to just kind of like look at my own hand if I can sort of get an approximation of the angle just for like the thumb a little bit. Still isn't going to be perfect, but I'm just trying to get something with like more motion, something less rigid. So I actually think what I'm going to do is have the finger pointing up just a bit more. This will be something that takes some time. Ooh, yeah, okay, I think we're getting there. I'm just sort of, so what I'm kind of doing mentally, I guess, I'm trying to sort of like identify what's going on in my head so that people can understand a bit more too, is I'm sort of taking I'm doing a vibe check on this every once in a while. I'm sort of reevaluating like what is the emotion I'm getting from this hand, or like feeling periodically. I'm just like too stiff, too stiff, too stiff, and then there's a point where I go, this is softer. It's starting to feel a little better. Like, what is the impression it gives you? And I suppose that might not be an easy thing to get across for everybody. Like I said, I think last time I mentioned that I'm a creature of instinct, and I would say that's kind of where I've been for a while. Hand's still small, but I'm checking this once in a while. And do we have gloves? I think we have gloves on our character, right? Kind of. We've got a finger cut, or whatever you'd call it. That's good to know. So we'll mark where those are. And you don't need to necessarily like shape out every digit. This finger's looking a little long and stubby. Some of the fingers will sort of create shapes of their own, right? Or be obscured by each other. I suppose it's something that I feel a little out of practice on. It's rendering hands. I know it's something a lot of people dread. Sometimes it goes better, sometimes it doesn't go as nicely, but you can always rework. It's just there's a lot of complicated forms to keep track of the lighting on, sort of, I would say is a lot of the difficulty. I might want this finger spread out a little. Does that look better or worse? Let's find out. It's got kind of claws right now a little bit. It's mostly that little area that's doing it. I don't know. It's getting a little rocky here. Pinky might be jutting out too far again. Yeah, I don't want to spend too long on any one area, but we can come back to that. Now it's kind of always looking at us like, what is happening to my hand? We may have not done as well as the first pass. What do you think? We're definitely darker, a lot darker. Cheat a little bit, go to adjustments and brightness. Oh, that's a little better. It might be the glare that's messing me up, but now our back tone's no longer a nice mid-range, so I want to bring that back down. Maybe the thumb should be more that way. We definitely have something softer here, but it's almost like too soft now. Color in the part that's going to be darker for a glove. Okay, I do think we're getting somewhere. Some nice contrast going on that we can take advantage of. But all in all, I think this is still going a little rough here on the hand. But we can darken some stuff. But now we have like a weird tangent. We'll have to be kind of subtle with our approach. Pick and choose. It's definitely tricky, you know. But like I want to keep emphasizing is that like you can always kind of like spend more time on an area to rework it. But you want to keep in mind, because like I compared, like, is this even looking better than what we started with? The answer might not always be yes. Sometimes it's worth fixing up a new thing, or an old thing, or making a new thing. We tried making a new thing, and I do think this is worth sticking with, but there's something off about him still. Hand to face ratio is a good size, but it might be the shoulders. There's something that's not quite reading right with the proportions. He's looking a little maybe bulky in some ways. It might be our waist. Might have a little too much thickness there for my liking. Kind of feel it out here. So these lines are sort of acting, they're helping define like where the extra parts of the, what would you call it, like a tunic or something, are sticking down. Like the parts of his top garment. But these edges are sort of acting as like checkpoints for my brain too. And I assume most viewers' brains, on sort of where our legs are. But okay, let's address this hand area. I like the marks here. There is a potential where we leave it the way it is and it's fine, but I feel like it's underutilized, and I want to display to the or demonstrate to the viewer that we're not sort of like shying away from what's going on here. Like we should give a purpose to what's happening here. We could have the hand resting on the leg here. I'm sort of putting in some dark marks on where just the bottom part where it's connecting to the leg would be, because that's where our deepest shadows would be. If you were going to put a darker mark, that's where it would likely go. Or we could have him be armed. So let's back that up and explore another option. Oh, actually we're still on our new layer, so we could be a little reckless here if we want. We'll be, yeah, I actually think our new hand is better now. So once we're happy with this, we'll need to remember to condense it to the layer underneath as well. God, how is it already 12:30? Oh, jeez. We're getting a little sidetracked talking about stuff, but I want to make sure I address people's questions and concerns. I'll keep an eye on comments for next time too, and see if there's something we can talk about that might be helpful. So yeah, we know he's got like a rapier of sorts, but I'm not sure if we can include it here very easily. We could have it either shooting towards the camera, which would be tricky. Like it would fit that way, but it might be tricky for it to read correctly. Like it gives more chance for confusion on the viewer's side. Or we could have it stick straight up, which does nice for the framing, but it's also along these tangents on the back, so it could end up flattening our image a bit. Or we could have it rest across the lap is sort of the third option I'm looking at. But the other thing too to consider is that the saber's hilt will be blocking the hand. So if you wanted to try rendering the hand a bit more, this might not be the best option, depending on what kind of guard it has. But it would be sort of baskety. Rapiers often have like very ornate hand guards. I actually think of if there was any prop, any like prop sword weapon I would want right now, it would probably be a replica rapier or something. I've been learning more about the historical significance of them. They're actually like super. They're very, very effective weapons. It turns out, like far more than a lot of sabers. It's kind of like you've perfected the idea of a sword by turning it more into a spear. It's interesting, but that's not really relevant. But it's nice to know these things. I think I might want to try sticking with this, but actually I want to change the angle a little bit. Probably should have caught that earlier so that we don't have to do as much work to backtrack here. But I'm seeing in my head here, in my imagination, let me do this on a new layer, because actually the blade would be a nice thing to keep like sharp and crisp, so we don't want to have to rework it too much. So we have our base here. I'm thinking we want the tip to be in the foreground kind of this way, so we can use our shift click method, which is what I'm doing, by the way. I think I forgot to mention. I mentioned it in the last session, is we're holding down shift and we're just clicking to create a straight line for ourselves. And now we have this on a new layer, so we can actually just like Control T to free transform, because I think it's reading still not quite the angle I want. And I'm now holding Control and moving the corners to sort of reshape it to get an angle that helps us. See, right now I think it's coming a little too close to the arm, so I guess we do want it lower. Like, you don't want to clutter things. Basically, I do have some hope in mind for this, is that I'm hoping this will give us some interesting cast shadows to give some more interesting movement in the leg area. But honestly, this might be the best we've got. One thing I would caution to avoid is having a flat line here. Like, you don't want it to go straight across. Anything like that has the risk of flattening your composition, taking away that sense of depth, and we don't want that. So and we actually have a few shadows to consider here. We have the arm cast on the blade, so we'll have our bright spot kind of go up to here and then a bit more here, but you want to be careful not to have like a tangent. You want to make sure it crosses over this edge in the back to place it on a different plane. But then we also have the shadow of the saber itself, and that'll help place it in space. So we already kind of have a edge here that we can sort of use for that. I don't know if people were picking up on the edge I was looking at ahead of time, but that would be a good sign that you are thinking the way I'm thinking. But see how this isn't going to be a flat shadow. This is going to be following the curvature of the legs, and coming closer to the blade it's going to be darker, and as it falls further away it's going to get lighter. So it's maybe a lot to consider, but basically a lot of things like that. I mean, there's a lot to consider when it comes to selling the space, you know, and a lot of it has to do with lighting. Basically, if you can get really good at lighting, you're going to get very good at selling your environments, or just like getting better at rendering, right? Some of the best artists in like industries and stuff, like concept art, whatever, some people get their start as photographers, which is mainly what you would learn as a photographer is lighting, and that's actually a very, very helpful skill to have. So I think one thing we want to do is eliminate this line here. It was going up a little too much. Sort of define our jaw a bit more. So we're maybe moving a little slower than I originally thought, but you can see that we are making progress here. We are adding to the figure. That is our goal here. Have more dark tones to really like add some contrast here. So I was thinking it might be interesting to have them in like a pool of blood or something dramatic, right? But importantly, we may want to focus still on the hand and perhaps something in the hand. So we're going to use a nice sharp bright tone to sort of highlight and create contrast for an object that we want to be important. I think I do want the thumb to be tucked in a little more still. The thumb is the part that I think still needs some feeling out, and the highlight on here is a little fat, so it's adding some girth to the finger. We don't want that, so we'll taper it a bit. So I'm just kind of creating like a chain, but perhaps there could be other elements. But right now it's kind of there just as a placeholder, kind of feeling out where we want this to be. You can add some like extra highlights or something if you want. Sparkle, sparkle. Ding. Not bad. Let's go ahead and Control E on the layer that we reworked. So now we have this top layer. Oh, that's where we're doing the sword. But we like where the sword's at, so let's be confident and condense that as well. All right, so we can go to the face now. Like, we haven't even really like done a whole lot with the face. I think as humans we're naturally drawn to like focus on that area but it's just another part, right? Like it's something that is going to be easy to mess up if you're starting out. Because, yeah, the thing about rendering faces is that every little mark makes a huge difference because we're so good at recognizing features. But as far as like the figure goes, realistically, it's just one more element. But you can be economical with where you are putting your focus, right? One thing of note, real quick, I'm reducing the shadow here, this outline border. By choosing to only reduce it on the top, I'm actually helping sell the perspective a bit there. I'm not sure exactly how to explain that. It's just like you would see less of an edge on the top, and you can have that sort of blend into the space that it's eclipsing. But yeah, like you will probably end up having more detail in the face and maybe like hands, or just like kind of this region broadly seems to be our focus right now. And that's also kind of where our edges are breaking. So I wonder if there's something there. Like imagine if this was like a locket or like a profile picture on like a site or something. This is probably where you would want to focus. The other details, they start getting fuzzier and there's maybe less emphasis there. And that kind of works. Like if we went like super crazy and like over rendered this knee or something, that would be a bit off. It would be unusual. It's very close to the edge, so it would direct the eyes away, and it doesn't tell as much of a story. I'll add some detail to like our castle back here too. And this is where being ADHD brained is a little helpful too, because I am already just sort of like seeing things and then I want to do them, and so I'll jump into them right away. That is actually helpful when it comes to painting. It's nice to not get too hung up in one area at a time, generally. You want to make sure you're kind of moving around the piece and giving attention to things so that you don't miss something important. You don't end up in a situation where you go, ooh, nailed it, and I'm done, and you realize that you spent an hour rendering one small portion, the rest of it was forgotten. I think of for millennials out there, the episode of SpongeBob when he has to write his paper and he just spends most of the work time just making the first word of his essay look immaculately calligraphied or whatever. But you forget to write your essay, sort of a loose metaphor. For people that share that experience. You're calling me out here. Hey, use it to your advantage. I'm trying to think of situations that I recall seeing people run into, or things that I think might be more common. Sorry if anybody got called out there. But yeah, no, it's something to keep in mind. You don't want to stay in any one area for too long. Okay, so instead of having this like hit the castle, I think I'm going to use this to sort of create another like motion. Or I'm having it streak behind the castle, and that'll help give us an opportunity to show depth again. We're separating another layer. The sky is now behind the castle more clearly. And the castle is more clearly behind our figure. And I'm also not going to worry about having a sharp edge here. Like we do want some softness to sort of blend these elements. Partly because they are the background and we don't want too much attention pulled that way. Not to the detriment of things in the foreground, at least. I don't know any gravestones that have like a big circle. Well, they might exist. I would still say that like the amount that we're doing here is still making a lot of use of like simple shapes, right? I'm not spending a lot of time like detailing. This is coming back to the heart of like a lot of my inspirations comes from like the world of concept art, and in that world my biggest lesson, and like something that still gives me a lot of inspiration, is basically like what I kind of echoed from it in my head was just the idea that like it's not about making a perfect stroke of the brush or whatever to imply detail. It's like you can use simple marks, you can use very loose and clumsy marks, but knowing where they go and what they're doing, like what they're conveying. Are they conveying light? Are they conveying form? Are they like knowing the purpose of why a stroke is there will help you be effective, basically. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm not just rendering with dark tones, but I'm alternating. So we have a background that's light tones, and then we have a dark tone, and then in the foreground we have another light tone to kind of help split it up. That'll kind of help us from getting too dark. And it is maybe more of a stylistic choice here. It wouldn't have necessarily like a ton of basis in like real lighting, but it helps us stay within our ranges here. We've got our darker tones in the front, and we've got lighter tones towards the back. Yeah, I do think we've been moving like a little slowly, but we are moving. We're doing little things kind of all around, and it is getting us closer to where we want to be. But yeah, we're staying in our grayscale here to do a lot of the rendering. We want to make sure we push and pull our lights as much as we care to before committing to like a color layer on top, because that's going to do a lot of work for us. So I think kind of our biggest light catcher here is stuff in this area. This is sort of where I'm a little timid because I don't want to like overdo some of this, but you'll start to get a feel for it, take bolder steps. We could start doing more on the face here, add some highlights. When it comes to rendering faces, again, like I feel like you could do like a whole nother course on this stuff. So I don't know how lost in the weeds I want to get talking about like how to render the perfect face right now. Not that I could tell you how to render the perfect face, but just do's and don'ts, things I've picked up. It's something that I personally have gotten better at just by doing it more and like messing up a lot. When rendering objects in the background that aren't in focus, how do you get a feel for what is an appropriate level of detail? I find that sometimes when transitioning to color, it fluctuates between looking over-rendered and under-rendered. That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how to answer. I guess, like right now I would say this is maybe under-detailed. Like it's just a bit splotchy, but I would say like maybe this is okay. Over here, and that I'm not sure if there's like a clean line of like when you're getting too rendered or too little rendered. But we've implied form and lighting, and that's good enough to place it in there. And like when it's off to the side, it reads okay. You know, if you're not looking at it, it reads as a 3D object. For my purposes, I find that's usually good enough. But basically, the idea is that you don't want it to fight for attention unless that it's intended to do so. Could it be when it starts to take away from the focal point? I would say that's a good way to put it. You don't want your background to be fighting the focal point for attention. So to get a feel for it, I suppose I would suggest like periodically sort of checking, you know. You want to be keeping tabs on like where the piece is going broadly. Again, just trying not to get too like lost in the weeds or focused in one area at a time, ideally. So yeah, you can see like so far nothing in the background's fighting, but I also think like I'm a little distracted by how splotchy this is. Although, hypothetically, if you didn't want to render... Makes sense? Okay, good. I hope so, but yeah, feel free to ask more questions about that if you need me to elaborate. I'll do my best. But see the splotchiness out here? You could maybe make an argument that we're looking at like a rainy setting, yeah? So you could even lean into this for a moodier sort of effect and start like really leaning into the edge destruction with the intent of like sort of implying rainfall, like really fuzzing it up. So that might be an effective way to to be lazier about it, I guess, if you don't want to render. But also, again, it's just you don't want it to fight for attention. I haven't like, again, the focus of this piece, the intent is not to spend a lot of time on the background. The goal was sort of to leave some things abstract, but that might be changing as we go. I'm seeing the opportunity to sort of elaborate in some areas, right? But I would say, yeah, like you can do a lot with just like simple lighting strokes. to imply highlights and form. See, like, adding this little bright spot here for contrast. It's adding a contrast point, but it's still pretty soft compared to what's going on over here. So I would say that it's still not totally fighting, but it's another location that the eyes can go. Yeah, I hear you. I'm on the hunt for ways to cheat and make it still look good. Some of that, like, a lot of people also get hung up, I think, on, like, finding your style, too. I don't know if I've talked about it yet here, but one of I think this was something I heard. If not, I remembered it incorrectly, but I still found it to be helpful. Was the idea of, like, how your style is formed generally is the idea that, like, you find ways to get around doing the parts that you hate. If that makes sense. And that's sort of like the shortcuts that you discover and sort of create for yourself, while still making a compelling image, sort of end up sticking as, you know, things that make your art different. It kind of becomes your style. I kind of compare it to like things that people find nostalgic or endearing about, like, previous media, right? Like, you know, you think of, like, the tracking lines and stuff on, like, a VHS tape. I don't know how old everyone is here, but, like, you know, things that, like, having to fix a cassette tape or whatever with, like, the pencil. You know, we've all seen the 80s movies, or, yeah, movies that are like love letters to that stuff, and be like, oh, remember that? You know, that's, at the time, that wasn't fun. It was a pain in the ass, but it's because, like, we found little we found little ways of, like, navigating difficulties. You sort of create an endearment to it. I don't know how applicable it is, but it reminds me of it. It might not be totally related. Like, developing your style goes, like, it's something that will happen whether you intend for it or not. So it's not something that I want people to be, like, super focused on. So our button here doesn't seem to actually be all that important. Like, it's actually pretty small. I suppose we could reduce it. Might be a little distracting here. I kind of like it, though. I think it gives us a space to kind of add some more character detail. Do you have any advice on how to stay motivated to work on an art piece? Because I get bored easy and then never finish. Oh, I definitely can relate to that. Reading the clock right, we're almost done with our hour. Yeah, as far as motivation goes, that's definitely something I can relate to. Early on, or, like, definitely, I think I'm getting better now, but this is something I've struggled with a lot over the time. I would say one thing that helped me is that if I started something that I was kind of happy with, but I didn't know how to finish, or, you know, maybe I got bored of it, I would set it down, but I would keep it somewhere. And then, you know, maybe when I'm running out of new ideas for art pieces, I have old files that I can look through. And when I'm further along on my art journey and feel more confident about things, I can revisit or restart pieces. I don't always, but, like, I still have a lot of files that I can go back and look through, of things that I kind of half started. But yeah, I would say there's not much harm in, like, restarting a new piece and moving on if you felt like you got what you wanted out of it, as long as it's not, like, for a project or something. But I'll think more on, like, how to stick with it. How do you go about letting go of a piece that you've got super stuck in your brain, can never get it right? Also, hi, I'm Jay. I'm Coaster. That's fine. No, thank you for the question, Jay. I appreciate you tuning in. Letting go of a piece that you've got stuck in your brain, can never get it right. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about, like, a piece that you're really committed to finishing, but you're struggling with it, and you would like to move on. I see. Well, I would keep in mind that, like, you're always going to be improving. So eventually that piece that you feel you're not getting right, executing on conceptually, to be more specific. Okay. That is tricky. What I was going to say has more to do with just, like, having confidence in yourself to, like, move on and, like, start something new, just because eventually that idea you might look back on it and find that it wasn't as strong as you thought it was. But if it was still a strong concept and you were struggling with where to take it, you could always kind of roll it forward into new ideas and sort of evolve it that way, maybe. Does that make sense? Like, I've had half of ideas for like comics and like stories and stuff that I felt were pretty strong, but looking back on it, I think that they have issues. But I usually have something new that I also have on my plate in the current, time that I'm kind of revisiting it. And I can pull ideas from the old stuff and roll it into the new, like take the parts that work, right? And kind of bring it forward. I hope that's helpful. But eventually too, as you grow and like learn more about, who you are and what you want to make, what kind of stories you want to tell, you might just get hit with the right inspiration. You might be able to go back and fix it or execute on the idea the way you wanted to. I'd say it's a matter of time, as long as you're like, addressing it or like keeping an interest, right? But you also don't want to like, if the idea of like letting go of a piece or like getting stuck on it, like I suppose there could be a danger there. Like you don't want it to like distract, right? So I could sympathize with that. But one of the class lessons we had in school was specifically about this, where we had to make a sculpture and then destroy it at the end. When's the next demo going to be? I'm going to shoot for next Thursday. We are going to wind down here because we're past time. But these are great questions. I want to try and do my best to address this while we're here. Even advice on staying motivated. As far as, I just want to revisit Clarice's question. I don't know if I fully answered it on staying motivated on art piece. I talked about like moving on from it, but I also, like when it comes to like actually forcing yourself to stay motivated, I would say the best thing that's helped me, to put it simply, is just like taking a piece as an opportunity to kind of like grow and learn, right? Like instead of executing, like, because I'll feel like I've executed on a concept pretty early, right? Where I'm just like, yeah, that's pretty good, and then it's like that about gets the idea. Used to be very tempted to kind of move on from that, and I still am to a degree, but the thing that can help me stay in instances like that is just like the opportunity to try and push the piece to make it one of the better things I've made. Like really try and see, like use every piece you work on as an opportunity to like push yourself and like grow as an artist, right? Really like areas where you normally would have stopped. It's like, what if you try to like push it a bit more and see what you can get out of it? Maybe you're inspired by a different artist than you were last week or something. And it's like, well, what if we did it in this style or something? I don't know. There's always more to do. Although, yeah, it's funny. These two questions are sort of opposite of each other, right? We have a question about sticking with a piece and a question about letting go. And it is sort of a balancing act because you will want to like, you have to cut the cord at some point, right? But in the meantime, you want to make sure that you're pushing yourself and getting as much as you can out of an artwork that you're committed to. So yeah, there's sort of a balance to be struck there. I hope I'm making sense. Thanks for the time. They're super helpful in getting his own art. Oh, that's great. Awesome. Yeah, no. Fantastic. I love to hear it. Or maybe spend loads of time chasing the high of a concept that will never feel right. Hey, whatever we're all on our different paths, so maybe you'll learn something that I didn't by doing that. Maybe you'll figure something out if you, as long as you're thinking critically about and thinking about growth, trying to resolve the issues you're coming across. I think eventually you'll get there. You'll figure something out. I did see one other comment in the general chat about like kind of falling into like an artist hole or whatever, where you feel like you're practicing and not getting anywhere. I would say that is something to try and avoid. But at the same time, I don't know if I would agree that might be the state. I don't know what that person's work was like, but they did sort of also express looking back and seeing that they maybe have progressed and that they were perhaps just comparing themselves to other artists. I would say that is more likely. I would hope so. Because when I'm like, last thing I'll close out on is just the idea of growing as an artist. The best thing you can do is compare yourself to your previous work, because you will almost always find that you have gotten better and improved. Especially early on, like you're gonna be moving a lot faster and like making a lot more progress. So yeah, I as long as you're practicing with the intent of sort of discovering, right, and not just, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, you will definitely learn something new every time you approach it. So yeah, before I start rambling on another subject, I will close out here. But got a few pieces to finish for school stuff. Never really had the motivation to finish them. So thanks. Gonna try it out. No, that's awesome. I wish you luck with those. Do your best out there. Do well in school. It will be worth it, even if it's a class that you're not totally jazzed about. Think about how you can use it to make better art. But yeah, no. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and yeah, we will be back. I'm shooting for next Thursday, same time. That's 12 p.m. Central Standard for me. And yeah, we will try to work more on this piece. Hopefully, I got a little sidetracked answering questions and stuff, but we will try to get this piece moving along. We are making progress. We got all the stuff that I was thinking about finishing last time done. So yeah, good stream, and I will see you all then. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Take care.